Hello and welcome to another Office 365 Hours, and may the 4th be with you. My name is Christian Buckley. I'm the Brand Alliance Director at AvePoint and a Microsoft MVP and Regional Director. And I'm joined today by Stacy Deere-Strole, a Microsoft MVP and the Founder and President at Focal Point Solutions, as well as Richard Toland, our CTO, also at Focal Point Solutions. Good morning, Stacy and Richard.
Good morning.
Morning.
Hello. So today we're discussing the topic of, and I guess do with the hood here, of discussing the topic of minimizing Power Platform sprawl. So it's a great topic. It's an increasingly popular topic of how do we manage this thing that is growing with leaps and bounds inside the organization. And so one of the biggest topics that you hear more and more people talking about and writing about around Power Platform is, what does governance look like around the Power Platform? What is the state of governance today as in regards to the Power Platform?
Well, I guess I'll start there. I'm sure Toland has a lot to say about this one. But for me, of course, I love governance, and this is an area that I always felt kind of fell short. Microsoft has beefed up a lot of things in the Security and Compliance Center to accommodate for the Power Platform. Saying, hey, these are things that you should be checking, right? But I've noticed more and more when we do those assessments, people don't even ever go look at the compliance report to even see these things that they should be doing. So someone still has to call them out, but I see it getting better and better that people say, we need this, right? But what is it that we really need and how do we get there? Where do we start? And we go from there. And then that's when kind of like I tapped some guy on the shoulder and I was like, hey, go talk to them. And Toland takes over from there because he's like, well, let's see what they got.
Hood, and it's a classic governance approach, right, for applications development, meaning a focus on the data or data integrity. Sometimes maybe the piggyback of the Security and Compliance Center is focused really on lifecycle and the security wrappers around the data bubbles. But largely, we also see concern around capacity, right? Because especially the Power Platform is meant for the power users to be able to get crazy and do what they want in their license structure. But all that stuff gobbles up capacity in an environment where, without a formal governance structure or at least somebody watching oversight on the capacity can run away. And so that's a big focus that a lot of customers we're dealing with today are leaning into is let's look at capacity, let's look at utilization, let's look at who's using it and how. Because the citizen developer is a powerful ally and they can totally gobble up all that IT storage really fast.
Made me think of is like, I heard over the years back in the SharePoint days of every time there was an upgrade to the search experience. And I'd hear from admins all the time, it's like, well, something in search is broken. Like the new version of SharePoint came out, and suddenly all of this data that shouldn't be visible to end users, they're able to see that, be like, no, search wasn't broken. What it was doing is that poor performance of search in the old version was hiding bad governance management of the data. People had access to things they couldn't see, and search wasn't adequately surfacing those things. Now it's working. Well, Power Platform is another way where if people are in there, if you don't have your house in order and they're accessing data, and if you don't have the proper oversight over the solutions that are being built, they may start surfacing and get access to things and uncovering weaknesses in your governance strategy.
Yeah, absolutely. So it goes back to when you used to build old on-prem environments where you just went next, 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 next. Hey, you're done. Let's go. And no one took into consideration the real configuration of what you just did and having GUIDs in your database names and, all this kind of stuff and the impacts of that. That's how Power Platform got started. People just started building, right? And they not really understanding that, hey, there's structure in this madness you just created. Let's go back to that structure. So now we're seeing the same types of things like, okay, so let's take steps back and kind of rebuild some of this stuff into the proper, governance structure, data structure, security structure. But luckily it's not taking years and years like, people building environments. It's happening much sooner because they know much sooner that there is a problem. And that, which is a good thing. A lot of times it comes in the whole capacity, hey, I'm running out of space, why, that type of thing. But it's more in your face now than ever, like poor environment builds, right? And because it hits their pocket really quick, it hits that pocketbook that they got to go out there and justify, right?
What other big gap, I guess, that adds to that issue is the issue around migrating solutions in. And this was something where, I mean, I think we've been through some of these issues enough within the collaboration ecosystem that it was much more as the citizen developers started ramping up, as Power Platform started to really grow rapidly, that people said, hey, we're going to repeat history here with a lot of the governance problems here. And so a lot of that was surfaced with when a solution is built in one part of the organization and other business units want to leverage that. And then they find out that, well, how do we migrate that out? How do we move that? How do we make that available? How do we make a solution that's scalable? What's the proper way to do that so that we can create solutions and share them between business units? It becomes exacerbated when you think about like mergers and acquisitions, as you acquire companies, as you are merging departments, if you're doing a reorganization and then suddenly have solutions that were available in one area or not, that could be a problem as well, where you start to surface some of these issues.
Yeah, absolutely. Some of the things that, when you talk about mergers and acquisitions is it kind of, things that we see all the time is one company does something completely different than the other, right? And not only do you have to figure out how to migrate it, but you got to do a whole new structure. Like some companies who got started in the Power Platform at a very early time, you didn't have the ability to create the multiple Power Apps environments, right? For promoting from one to the other. And we've run into that scenario a number of times where people who just got started are using that type of, process because they've kind of got a little bit of governance associated to it. But you can definitely tell people who jumped into it versus not, and then so trying the struggle of migration, but then also changing everything for them and coming up with that new clean process and how properly to do it, because it is a change for them, cleaning up permissions, all that kind of stuff. It's been quite the struggle. And I still hope that Microsoft can come up with some better tools to help with migration of the Power Platform. Right now, to me, I feel like there's a hole there. But
Totally echo that. And I think the biggest hurdle is, I would say, inconsistency between the three legs, right? So Power Platform is the trifecta of your tooling around data. But when you want to pick them up and merge them or migrate them, it's a different pipeline, right? There is no beautiful utopian story for Power BI. That's just painful all over the place, migrating from tenant to tenant. But when you look at now the integration of the things we're now able to pull together with solution structure and environment promotion and the software development lifecycle tools for the combination of Flow and Power App together, Power Automate and Power Apps. Those the story is, I think it's a lot cleaner. It helps with building in the classic governance structure of software development lifecycle, to help usher the citizen developer into, that's great, you clicked an easy button and you made your cool app. Now we need to talk about how can we refactor that app or pull it into something that's a migration mechanism or a pipeline for us to get between tenants or promote between environments. And Power BI, I think, is still, it's coming around. It's a big beast, and that's a hard one to fit into that pipeline.
For that though, I mean, the way that it was sold early on, it really was like the non-technical, a little bit technical business user that is able to go in and solve problems, create workflows, create simple Power Apps for improving their own space. And so a lot of those solutions, they were never meant to scale up to the enterprise. But a lot of organizations are looking at this and they're saying that, hey, this is actually a line of specialty for developers, for very technical people. Solutions using the platform. So which is it? Is it both? Do you need to do you need to have a track for people to go for that, or do you have like a team that provides oversight and go build whatever you need for your own team, for your business unit, solve your problems in the day to day? But if it wants to be scaled, hand it off to another team to go and look at it and potentially re-architect it?
Yeah, I'm going to use a term I never thought I was going to use, but Power Platform provided that area of user adoption for me, right? You gave them a quick and easy tool to go do user adoption stuff. I like this. I'm going to go build stuff. And they did a great job. And then everybody's like, this is cool. And they start using it. And then you're like, dang, now this is an organizational wide thing that everybody wants to use. And it was built in the wrong place to do so, right? It's not secure. It's not.
Hey, you know what? That sounds a lot like SharePoint, the SharePoint story. WSS. Went and built this on a server that's sitting under my desk. I went and built it, and then suddenly CEO looks at it and says, I want more of that. Everybody should have that thing.
So when dev environments were all of a sudden prod, yes, right? Platform, same thing. But I mean, these guys, I mean, devs, citizen developers, some of them are really good. They have great ideas, right? But there has to be proper governance put in place. I'm like, when is that line crossed? When that line crosses, what do you do? What is that process, right? You know, when you talk about, hey, now it needs to run under a service account and it needs to be at a different level and not just in a department, but everybody else is coming in that department's data and getting, you know, using this information, right? So yeah, I call that the user adoption fail.
Yeah, I think it's a lot of the same marketing material or marketing approach as like InfoPath took when it first came out, right? And I apologize for the cussing and swearing at you, but InfoPath was a real thing, right? And they always inevitably got to a level of complexity where IT had to get involved. And it was great at small things, but when you really wanted to scale it up, it was time to step up into, you know, put on our big kid pants and let's talk about some structure and some rigor that we have to wrap around. Gosh, the data's volatile because now I'm building and changing right on production. That's never a good idea, right? Or I'm going to make a code change and now I need a level of complexity. I need a C# developer to help me talk to a custom data source. That's never a good idea for a citizen developer, right? They may be smart enough to do it, but maybe shouldn't have that kind of reach. And when you start talking about the governance and controls around how do I sprawl these things out in a structured fashion, right? Because sprawl is just sprawl. It's going to get crazy. And people, you know, like we've been saying, they'll have access to the wrong data, or maybe they won't have permissions when they need it the most. I got to put in my timesheet. Why isn't this flow executing for me? Well, because you don't have permissions. And I think there's, from a usage perspective, or, you know, talking along the lines of migration, there's classic applications like an InfoPath or a custom ASP dev that needs refactored. And some of the hurdles we are facing a lot is that, you know, that's old stuff. It's crusty and dusty, and we don't have access to the dev environment where that was built. Sorry. Here, this is what it did. Go reverse engineer this. That I needed to work like that yesterday, and that's never a good requirement. It needs the time for reverse engineering. It needs the time for quality assurance and to understand really how does it fire? How does it function? What are the inner workings? And sometimes, you know, I think especially from a governance perspective, that's a perfect time to sit down with a client or your enterprise and say, ooh, let's really talk about this process. Does it have to work the same way? Can we change it? Do we need to optimize it for better tools now? And I think going at those kind of projects with the forethought of how can I, one, put this into a formal but easy software development lifecycle for promotions, and two, how can we talk about distribution, right? So Power Apps is great. It's grown to the point where now we have Power Apps can build in a super easy fashion to publish out to teams, right? I can use the Dataverse for Teams now and have a structured data model that's distributing like wildfire all throughout my through my structured and organic teams that are, you know, in heavy use for collaboration throughout the enterprise. And it comes with structured, you know, security. It comes with structured permissions to the data and the execution layer. In some cases, being able to use Dataverse, which is a governance mind blown, I think, for a lot of clients is that the Dataverse allows you to do role-based permissions at the data. And citizen developer rarely thinks of that. That's a difficult thing to do as the citizen developer, using a SharePoint list as a data backend, right? When you can do row level security, that's a conversation point for the enterprise to have about maybe we should put some more structure and rigor on this.
I think Dataverse also sounds very on theme with May the 4th and Star Wars-esque. So it's out in the Dataverse.
It's in the Dataverse.
This is not the database you were looking for. It's well. So one of the things, Stacy, this is not the way. Stacy, one line you talk about, lines to cross. One of the lines of like, where does this move away from being a point solution for my team, and is this something we can go and scale? Is the question about the licenses. So if I went and built something and then others want to use it and they don't have the licenses that are appropriate, and I've not been following everything that's been happening within Power Platform around that, and I know that there have been changes a number of times. It's like one of those things where there's something exciting happening out in the ecosystem when there's cheers and jeers from the crowd around different movements. And licensing is always one of those topics that brings a lot of cheers, a lot of jeers. But
when Microsoft, a citizen developer, can start using, Power Platform Pro licensing as they're building and not have to have approval from management, right?
Yeah, little things. Yeah.
Like, that was crazy. Everybody's like, you got to be kidding me. I'm like, but it was good that they called it out, because then you could go do something about it, right? That's where you go and lock some things down and put some, like, Toland always says, like, put some rigor behind this and, make sure you got your process and all that kind of stuff. But I mean, there's so much in there, and it's like, I just don't think anybody realizes how big Power Platform itself, how big it is. One thing that, when Toland was talking, it made me think of when we talked about, the sprawl and how easy it is for people to do things, and, things start crossing. One of the other things that made me think of is when people leave the organization that have built.
Yeah.
You talk about another conundrum and mess, right? Because they disable that account, there goes any flows and everything that they had built. And migrating those over to different accounts, not so easy if you get things in process, right? And I mean, we've dealt with that a number of times. But I mean, lines, but they get blurry, they get crossed quite a bit. And the more, before, I always like to tell organizations, before you go and implement your next biggest thing in your environment, please do your due diligence. Know what things mean, know what it means by allowing for citizen developers, have a process. Hey, if you're trying to do this, great, but there's a line, there's a level, and try to configure your environment to only allow them to do what you want them to do. Don't allow them to just have keys to the kingdom, which unfortunately we see a lot, because people don't understand yet, but they're getting.
The other way to look at that, being consultants, is that it's an opportunity to go in there. That's those. I know that those. I mean, but every consultant that I talk to will say this, basically a version of the same thing. Like, they hate those projects. They'd rather help work on the next big productivity, efficiency, build something, versus going and cleaning up all the time.
So Toland and I have a joke. We call ourselves the cleanup crew.
Yeah, it's a lot, right? And sometimes, I mean, it's all over the place. It could be, hey, we built these things too small, we need them to be bigger, help us sort out licensing to get bigger. Power BI is the bane of my existence with that, right? Because somebody built cheers and jeers report. It gives me, the magic golden ticket number that I need for my quarterly budgets. Nobody can answer it or open it because they don't have the license for it. So helping to sort that out, so that, clients also have concern of overbuy, right? Because you can say E5s for everybody, check the box. But we're only going to turn
Microsoft loves that answer.
Right? Yeah, no, it's perfect, and we're only going to give it to 3 of you. So it's easy license maintenance, license management, but only 3 of you are going to use it. Total overspend, and they're not using the product like they could be. So we do a lot of that kind of conversational and investigative analysis to help understand really a true up of how let's maximize your utilization here of the license that you're paying for versus, everybody's got the easy button at any point in time. And I think too, Power BI aside, Power Automate and Power Apps, the easy buttons are there in their face, and there's no turn it off to integrate option. So when somebody clicks the button and says, "Oh, I have to spin up a trial," what? That generates a lot of questions. And I think from an adoption perspective, sometimes that, when you take away Power Apps or Power Automate for everybody, it needs to be communicated. In that governance structure, if you're going to take an approach where you're locking down your environment, so only certain people are using it for certain tools, you need to communicate to them that it won't work, right? And this is the expected behavior. Otherwise, it builds, I don't want to say distrust, but it builds a lack of user adoption. This thing never works for me. I can never get the tools to go. And that's a struggle sometimes too.
Yeah, it gives that negative connotation to it, right? Which is, so one of the things we try to stress is only purchase the licensing that you need right now. If you're for it, don't buy it. Save the money, put that in the budget so that you can do bigger and better things. Don't waste that money now. It is way too easy to increase your licensing when you're ready for it. Don't do it. Know what you need right now and use it to its full capabilities until you're ready to grow.
I think that's been a shift in even Microsoft's thinking about that, where they used to be, they would get angry when partners would say to very large customers, like, you overbought on those licenses. But what Microsoft learned that lesson is it doesn't make any sense to sell 100,000 seats and then have 70,000 of those seats go unused. That it's not a happy customer. They know that they've wasted money on that. It's much better off to sell them 50,000 seats and have 80% efficiency, of those, and the right license types around that. Don't oversell on the license types of those things. But we should have the same philosophy internally. It's fine to go and scale, prove that we need the additional licenses, and then scale that up. Don't just go and overbuy thinking, hey, we're going to actually leverage all these things.
Right. Well, I mean, you will have Microsoft and organizations will have much better analytics of what their organization is actually doing and utilizing, right? When you do heavy, Microsoft doesn't have accurate numbers, right? They just assume they're doing E5 stuff. They have no idea really, right? But if someone starts slower and then they increase, they can tell that there's growth in that organization, right? Which the organization can tell. There's metrics associated to it. Microsoft can tell there's metric associated to it. And people know it means that there's user adoption within that organization as well, because things are being used and they're asking for more and they're asking for more, which then they need more licensing. So you have a much better tell of what your organization is doing by only getting what you need in the beginning and then using it to grow.
Yeah. And I think a lot of that couples hand in hand with that governance structure, right? And when we say governance structure, so many people think that's a governance document and I'm going to set it on the shelf and it's going to get dust on it. It is a life cycle. It's a living, breathing process that every organization should, and look beyond Microsoft tools. It's a process. Governance is more of a process than anything. And we see the makers, the Power Platform maker role, the power users from yesteryear in InfoPath. They're our biggest advocates if we can set them up to have a voice in a governance structure. Right? They know your data best. They know the way the business operates best, and involving them in the process of a promotion of, hey, I'd like to use this feature. Let's talk about why. Let's talk about costs and promote that up through that governance structure, governance process to say, let's look at SKUs now and let's look at implementation strategies. Is a fantastic way to deeply involve and engage those advocates in the business that, they're your best friends. They might have been the bane of your existence for years, but they are your best friends on how the business operates.
One of my Buckleyisms, I always say, this is appropriate, so I get to say it here, is the more that you involve people in the process, the more likely they will support that process. And so that is a key aspect of that. If you're, crazy idea, like, let's get the people that own the data involved. Let's get the people building the solutions involved. And it's not always the same. Those are two different groups there. And then have conversations that IT should not making these. Your leadership team should not be making these decisions in a vacuum. It should be a conversation between those constituencies.
Yeah, so based off of that total philosophy right there, I actually have built and Toland loves it because, I mean, it allows everybody to work with it, is built a governance site that is 100% automated and allows feedback from the individual. So like they could say, I want to create a Power App, right? And they can see what their guidelines are for building it because they've searched, because we put it in a site, which they're page-based, and we're assigning owners, expiration dates, all that stuff with automation so that they're being updated. But the great thing is the owners is not just the people that are the librarians of the content. It is the people that actually own it. And the thing is, I'm not a huge person of enabling comments on like every page you create because some of them are just information based. But it's a great place to allow for comments because then users, as they see the information, can supply comments on, hey, but I'm doing this or I'm doing that, and gives you that visual insight. It takes you from a governance team this small to everybody in your organization.
Right.
So it's just a small subset anymore. And it's all automated. You're getting the feedback that you need, and everybody feels involved and feel like they're part of the decisions within your organization.
Team effort. Collaboration is a team effort. Come on. Yeah. Come on, people. Yeah. Hello.
Collaborate alone. I dare you. I challenge you. Collaborate alone.
Yeah.
The thing is like, being on the governance team would always seem like a big job, and it used to be, right? But now you can share the love, and it's not such a big task, especially if you can put it in an automated process in a place, and it's part of your search and your natural everyday process. It's a great tool.
And I think that speaks a lot to the whole nature of the Power Platform, especially as you get more structured and more governed, right? Like your citizen developer are lone wolves. They're out there, Mandalorian style, just rolling their own until they find a buddy. And then when they find a buddy, now it's like, oh, now I got to learn how to share. That's a difficult thing to do in the Power Platform when you built everything as a solo person. In the structure, I think when you're wrapping all of that structure, the rigor of Power Platform's environments, of the tooling, of the connector flexibility that's in there, and as you really wrap that up, you can now break apart an application into smaller components, and multiple people can all build together. Go back to that collaboration, right? We can have a team of folks in the business that understand how to build an app, and a team of folks that understand how to do data constructs and manipulation and security, and they can all roll everything together into a single cohesive solution that's now portable. And getting to that point, right, as you wrap the governance around it, you start plucking sprawl out of your organization, and getting to that point, it's a little bit utopian. But it's a difficult challenge. It's a lot of hard conversations along the way, and it's a lot of time and investment in really understanding the processes that are behind it. Is this bigger than a breadbox? Should this be something I need to share with my buddy, or can I rock this solo forever? Yeah. I think those are the questions that deep engagement with your power users, with your makers, your advocates, having that deep involvement, that deep discussion educates them too to think, should this be bigger than a breadbox?
In the words of Yoda.
And do I need a cooler license?
Yeah, in the words of Yoda, do or do not, there is no try, right? Collaborate.
Well,
do it.
Well, thank you again, Stacy and Richard, for yeah, or that. That's do
it.
I could
do it now.
I could do that. It's like I
could
do that now. Now, do it. I think that's where "Just Do It" came from. I'm pretty sure that's where that tagline came from. But thank you again, Stacy and Richard, for joining me this morning, and happy May the 4th to everyone out there. If you have not already done so, please subscribe to Office Hours so you get notifications about upcoming shows coming to you on the first and third Wednesday of each month at 11 a.m. Eastern. So thanks for watching. Thanks, everybody.
Bye. Bye.